Hello fellow duelists, I am making my first deck profile. I'm going to go through my cards and tell you what each one does. This one is one of my Dark Magician decks themed around Timaeus, and I will begin by moving my extra deck off to the side. First I have the Dark Magician. I have 3 of him. He has no effect, but his attack and defense is 2,500 and 2,000 respectively. Then next up we have Dark Magician Girl. I only have 1 of her, and her effect is this card gains 300 attack for every Dark Magician or Magician of Black Chaos in either player's graveyard. Then we have Dark Magician Knight, which his effect states, this card cannot be normal summoned or set. This card cannot be special summoned except by the effect of Knight's title. This card is special summoned successfully. Selects 1 card on the field and destroy it. It has 2,500 attack and 2,100 defense. In Dark Magician Girls, I forgot to state her attack and defense is 2,000 attack and 1,700 defense. Next up we have 2 Magician's Robes. A really decent card for a Dark Magician deck. Its effect states, during your opponent's turn you can discard 1 spell or trap card, special summon 1 Dark Magician from your deck. This is a quick effect. During your opponent's turn you can activate a spell or trap card or effect while this card is in your graveyard, except during the damage step. You can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each effect of Magician's Robe once per turn. Its attack is 700, defense is 2,000. Next is one of my personal favorites besides Dark Magician himself. This is Palladium Oracle Mahad. His effect is, when you draw this card, you can reveal this card. Special summon it from your hand. If this card battles a dark monster, its attack is doubled during the damage step only. If this card is destroyed by battle or a card effect, you can special summon 1 Dark Magician from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Its attack is 2,500, defense is 2,100. Next up is another of my personal favorites, and this is Sorcerer of Dark Magic. This is a long effect, so I may have to take a few breaths while reading it. It states, cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by tributing 2 level 6 or higher spellcaster type monsters, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. During either player's turn, when a trap card is activated, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. This card must be face up on the field to activate and resolve this effect. Its attack is 3,200 and its defense is 2,800. Next up is a Magician's Valkyrie, just 1 of her. Her effect is, your opponent cannot select other spellcaster type monsters you control as an attack target. Its attack is 1,600, defense is 1,800. Then we have a Maiden with Eyes of Blue. Another long effect, even longer than Sorcerer of Dark Magic, so I will be taking a few breaths. When this card is targeted for an attack, you can negate the attack. If you do, change the battle position of this card. Then you can special summon 1 Blue Eyes White Dragon from your hand, deck, or graveyard. During either player's turn, when a card or effect is activated that targets this face-up card, except during the damage step, you can special summon 1 Blue Eyes White Dragon from your hand, deck, or graveyard. You can only use 1 Maiden with the Blue Eyes effect per turn, and only once that turn. Next up is Blast Magician. He can be pretty mean if used correctly. His effect is, each time you or your opponent activates 1 spell card, put 1 spell counter on this card by removing any number of spell counters from this card. Destroy 1 face-up monster on the field with an attack equal to or less than 700 points times the number of removed spell counters. His attack is 1,400 and defense is 1,700. and Maiden with Eyes of Blue's attack and defense are both 0. Next up is the Summoner Monk. His effect is this card cannot be tributed. When this card is normal or flip summoned, change this card to defense position. Once per turn, you can discard one spell card, special summon one level 4 monster from your deck. It cannot attack this turn. Attack is 800, defense 1600. Next is Magical Something. That is actually the name of the card. As soon as it comes into focus, you can see it. Its effects is each time a spell card is activated, place one spell counter on this card when that spell card resolves. This card's level is increased by the number of spell counters on this card. You can remove 3 spell counters from this card, then target one quick play spell card in your graveyard. Set that card to your spell or trap zone. You can only use this effect's Magical Something once per turn. Next up is Magna Drago. He is a dragon tuner and effects monster. If this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, it gains 200 attack. Its attack is originally 1400 and defense is 600. Luster Dragon is next. He is a normal monster with 1900 attack, 1600 defense. Up next we have Pendulum monsters, which are kind of new to the game but not one of the newest sets. First we have Stargazer Magician with a pendulum scale of 1, and I am not going to be reading both of their effects because they are all too long-winded. His attack is 1200 and defense is 2400. I only use the pendulum monsters to do some pendulum summoning, so I do not actually use their effects. Next up is Drama Eye Magician. He has a pendulum scale of 2. Attack is 2000, defense 2500. Next up is Timebreaker Magician. Again, pendulum scale of 2. Attack 1400, defense 0. Time Gazer Magician is next, one that I use the most often. His pendulum scale is 8, allowing me to summon Dark Magician with ease in combination with any of the lower ones. His attack is 1200, defense is 600. Next up is Acrobatic Magician with a pendulum scale of 2 as well. Attack of 800, defense 2300. Next up is Wisdom Eye Magician, one that I use a lot with Time Gazer. His pendulum scale is 5, attack 1500, defense 1500. Next is Noble Dragon Magician, another one I use in combination with the Time Gazer. Has a pendulum scale of 5, attack 700, defense 1400. Next is Magical Abductor, pendulum scale of 3, attack 1700, defense 1400. Dragon Pit Magician has no effect, and his pendulum scale is 8, attack 900, defense 2700. I tend to use him a lot with some of the lower ones, just like I do Time Gazer, to help me get Dark Magician real easily. Up next is the Magic cards, and the first one is the card that this deck is themed around, the Eye of Timaeus. And it states, this card is also treated as Legendary Dragon Timaeus. Target one Dark Magician monster you control, meaning Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. Fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck that lists that monster on the field as a fusion material. Using it as fusion material, you can only activate one Eye of Timaeus per turn. And using this effect, you have no need of polymerization. Next up is a card, well, the next few are cards that I normally use only with my Dark Magician. First we have Diffusion Wave Motion, a card that most of you who watch the original show know what it does. Pay 1,000 life points to target one face-up level 7 or higher spellcaster type monster you control. This turn only that monster can attack, and it must attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. The effects of effect monsters destroyed by these attacks do not activate and are negated. And with this card, you cannot attack your opponent's life points directly, just all the monsters that they control. Next up is a card that I love with my Dark Magician, because it is really helpful. My opponents, my friends that I usually play against, love to use spell and trap cards, and this card works great. It is Dark Magic Attack, and it says, if you control a face-up Dark Magician, not Dark Magician Girl, destroy all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. Thousand Knives, another one that if you have watched the original anime, you would know this card. If you control a face-up Dark Magician, again, not a Dark Magician Girl, target one monster your opponent controls and destroy that target. Illusion Magic, another of my favorites with my Dark Magician combos. It states, tribute one spellcaster type monster, add up to 2 copies of Dark Magician from your deck and or graveyard to your hand. You can only activate one illusion magic per turn. Next up, Dark Magic Expanded. This is a long effect, and it requires Dark Magician and or Dark Magician Girl. And it states, apply these effects in sequence based on the number of Dark Magician and or Dark Magician Girl on your field and in the graveyard. And they are, if you have one or more, one Dark Spellcaster type monster you control on the field, one Dark Spellcaster type monster on the field anywhere gains 1,000 attack until the end of this turn. 2 or more. This turn, your opponent cannot activate cards and effects in response to your spell or trap cards or effects activation. Also, spell and trap cards you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. 3 or more. Dark Spellcaster type monsters you currently control are unaffected by your opponent's card effects until the end of this turn. As I said before, a really nice card, and I will be saying that a lot about a lot of this deck. This is my favorite deck to use. I tend to use it all the time. I almost always win with it. Up next, I have Knight's Title, required to summon Dark Magician Knight. And it says, tribute one face-up Dark Magician, special one Dark Magician Knight from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Next up, we have a Fusion Recovery. And I have polymerizations in this deck farther in, which is why this card is in here. It states, add one polymerization and one fusion material monster that was used for a fusion summon from your graveyard to your hand. Then I have a Mage Power. I don't know if this one was ever in the anime, but I love using this card myself. It states, the equipped monster gains 500 attack and defense for each spell and trap card you control. Next up is Sacred Sword of 7 Stars, another one I use quite a bit. Banish one level 7 monster from your hand or face up from your side of the field. Draw 2 cards. You can only activate one Sacred Sword of 7 Stars per turn. Then I have a Cup of Ace, which says, toss a coin. If heads, draw 2 cards. If tails, your opponent draws 2 cards. It's essentially a way to get Pot of Greed and still be legal for tournaments, which is what I try to make all of my decks be, which you will see as I do future deck profiles. Next up, I have Spell Shattering Arrow, which states, destroy all face-up spell cards your opponent controls. For each destroyed spell card, inflicts 500 damage to your opponent. I apologize for the shaking. I am resting my arm on my knee, and my leg tends to move. Next up, I have Magical Stone Excavation, which states, discard 2 cards, add 1 spell card from your graveyard to your hand. Which, if you use it properly, you can use that card to get the Eye of Timaeus back in your hand, so you can get both of the fusion monsters I have requiring him into your field. Next up is Card Trader, a card I used to use a lot, but I don't use as much anymore because it irritated my friends, because it caused me to take really long turns. Its effect states, once per turn, during your standby phase, you can shuffle one card from your hand into the deck and then draw one card. And that card only caused me to take long turns because I shuffle for a while and I make sure my deck is completely shuffled. Next up is Yami, one of my favorite cards ever since playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses. It states, increase the attack and defense of all Fiend and Spellcaster type monsters by 200 points. Also decrease the attack and defense of all Fairy monsters by 200 points. And it is a field card. Next up is Swords of Revealing Light. I have 2 of them. Yet another one that I use to irritate my friends because it buys me a lot of time. And if you watch the show, you know what it does. But for those who do not, I will read its effect. Flip all face-down monsters on your opponent's side of the field face up. This card remains face up on the field for 3 of your opponent's turns. As long as this card remains face up on the field, your opponent cannot declare an attack. Next up is a Polymerization. I have 2 of them in here. And again, if you have watched the TV show, you will know what this card does. And it states, fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using materials from your hand or your side of the field as fusion materials. Next up is Summoner's Art, one that I love to use to get my Dark Magician into my hand. I am actually trying to get an Ancient Rules so I can use that in combination. Summoner's Art says, add 1 level 5 or higher normal monster from your deck to your hand. And for those of you that are wondering, Ancient Rules allows me to special summon any 1 level 5 or higher normal monster to the field from my hand without attributing. Double Summon says you can normal summon 1 additional time this turn. You can only gain this effect once per turn. Dust Barrier, a continuous spell card, says face up normal monsters on the field are unaffected by your opponent's spell cards. This card is destroyed during your second standby phase after activation. Next up are my traps. This next one is one I love to use a lot because it is really mean and my cousin used to use it against me all the time. It is a magical cylinder. It states, when your opponent's monster declares an attack, target that attacking monster. Negate the attack and inflict damage to your opponent equal to that target's attack. Next up is a magic jammer. Sorry, I cannot speak at the moment. It states, discard 1 card from your hand to negate the activation of a spell card and destroy it. Next up is a Sakuretsu Armor. It says, activate only when an opponent's monster declares an attack during the attack, then destroy the attacking monster. Anti-Fusion Device. This is the last card in the main deck, and it states, destroy 1 face-up fusion monster on the field. Quite simply put. Next we have my extra deck, which just consists currently of 3 fusion monsters, all revolving around the Eye of Timaeus. And there is a third one for the dragons, not this one over here, but there's a third one revolving around the 2 dragons that is out that I am currently trying to get. My friend has it and he will not let me have it, so I need to go out and buy it at some point. Now we'll include that in a pack opening farther into the future, so keep an eye out for that. But first we have Amulet Dragon, which is a fusion monster requiring either the Eye of Timaeus or, with the use of Polymerization, any dragon monster, and the Dark Magician. My favorite card. Not this one, the Dark Magician. Its effect states, must be fusion summoned with the above materials or with the Eye of Timaeus, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. If this card is special summoned, target any number of spell cards in any graveyard or graveyards, minimum of 1. Banish those targets, and if you do, this card gains 100 attack for each card banished by this effect. If this card is destroyed, you can target one spellcaster monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. And its initial attack is 2900 and its defense is 2500. Next up, Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight. A very mean card if used properly. And she is the same way as the Amulet Dragon. Requires either the Eye of Timaeus in Dark Magician Girl, or Dark Magician Girl and any dragon monster with the use of polymerization. And it states, must be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials or with the Eye of Timaeus, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Once per turn during either player's turn, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, then target one face-up card on the field and destroy that target. As I said a minute ago, it can be very mean if used properly. Next up is Timaeus, the Knight of Destiny, which he requires Legendary Knight Timaeus, Legendary Knight Critias, and Legendary Knight Hermos. And his effect states, must be special summoned from your extra deck by sending the above cards you control to the graveyard, and cannot be special summoned by any other way. And you do not use polymerization for this effect. This card is unaffected by other cards' effects once per battle. If this card attacks or is attacked during damage calculation in either player's turn, you can make this card's attack and defense become equal to the attack of the monster on the field, with the highest attack, your choice if tied. When this card is destroyed by battle, you can special summon 3 legendary knight monsters from your hand, deck, or graveyard, ignoring their summoning conditions. And its attack and defense are both question marks. I will try to let it come into focus so you can see. But that is my Dark Magician deck revolving around the Eye of Timaeus. I hope you enjoyed this video. Keep an eye out for future ones.